Welcome to the first episode of Aleks Answers, where you ask me philosophy questions and I try and answer them. Thank you to everyone who submitted your questions on Instagram. I probably won't be able to get through to all of them, but hopefully the ones I chose to answer will be interesting and insightful. If you'd like to submit a question for the next episode of Aleks Answers, you can do so by leaving a comment below or send me a message on Instagram at AlexListens. Okay, let's get to the questions. Question 1. How is Instagram a tool for meaningful change? And if it's not, should we all log off right now? The best place to begin would be by trying to define meaningful change. And I think there are two ways that we can understand meaningful change. The first way is by trying to locate change in outcome, in the outcome of a person's act or behavior or kind of attitude or this thing. So it's outcome focused. And the second way that we can understand change is by looking at the attitude itself and not being concerned with the outcome. And so Instagram and I guess social media in general will make it difficult for us to know what people's attitudes actually are, because it's very easy to kind of build an online persona, build an online identity, and have people interpret that for who you are and for what you stand for, and this kind of thing. So I think meaningful change on social media is going to be very hard to kind of gauge in terms of what people's attitudes actually are. I guess over the past few years, there's been this thing that's been thrown around called virtue signaling. And I guess very briefly, virtue signaling is the idea that, someone is kind of only saying that they believe in something or they care about something because they want to kind of pledge allegiance to a particular group and fit in, rather than it being something that they necessarily care about or believe in. So this is the sense in which Instagram isn't going to be the best platform for kind of promoting meaningful change for the actual people who are signaling that they care about certain things, because I guess there's very little accountability. You can kind of signal that you have undergone meaningful change. Let's say you repost something about a particular political event. You make a post about it, or you kind of share it on your story. And I guess it's very hard to tell what this actually means. If you're trying to answer the question of what this means in terms of someone's attitude. I think this is a very important question to think about, because I think it reveals a really big kind of deficit in the capacity of social media to reveal who people actually are. And this kind of opens quite a dark and slippery slope for thinking about, how people are inauthentic on social media and how people can be, can kind of operate behind some kind of mask. And I think that, many people are trying to reproduce authentic versions of themselves on social media in the form of, photos and text. But I guess there's only so far that you can go with. There's only so much of yourself that you can kind of pronounce to the world through photo and text. So I think this is where, there's some helpful ethics and some helpful moral philosophy that comes in. Because I think it's up to each person to kind of decide whether they are going to judge meaningful change from the perspective of what people's attitudes are, or whether they are going to try and understand it from the perspective of what the outcome of people's behavior is. Now you'll see on my bookshelf, this book here and this book here, and you probably can't see who the author is, but the author is a philosopher called Peter Singer. And Peter Singer is a consequentialist. And I guess what consequentialism is it's a philosophy and a kind of ethical attitude that focuses on the outcome of on the consequence of actions. And so if you're a consequentialist, if you're concerned with the consequences of someone's acts, meaningful change for you on Instagram probably isn't going to be concerned with how authentic people are or how much they actually believe in the cause they're getting behind. And if you're a consequentialist, you're probably not going to care too much about virtue signaling if, what is being signaled is kind of producing some outcome that you want. For example, if a bunch of people share posts about Oxfam and everyone starts to give money to Oxfam, the consequentialist isn't going to care what people's attitude towards Oxfam or charity is. They're just going to be concerned with the consequences of giving to charity, which is that it's going to manifest in, minimizing suffering, making certain surgeries available, and this kind of stuff. So I think that's how I would think about the question of meaningful change on Instagram. So I guess to kind of summarize all of that, yes, I think meaningful change is possible on Instagram. And I think I probably hold some kind of hybrid view about Instagram, which is something like there are some instances where, the people's attitude is going to be very important. And then there are other instances where it's the consequences of the act or the thing that's being shared or the thing that's being discussed that is going to be important. But I think ultimately both are very important. And I think that trying to hold both sides at the same time, trying to believe that attitude is important and consequence is important, isn't something that's going to be very popular in philosophy. Most philosophers seem to be kind of on one side or the other. And then there's the second part of the question, which is, if it's not possible, should we all log off social media right now? So I think it is possible, but let's entertain the question of whether or not we should log off social media right now. I think that one thing that many people, including myself, don't have the most profound awareness of all the time is that we have become, that our mode of socializing has changed really dramatically. And I guess a lot of the interactions we have with people are now cyber and they're online. And so I think that in trying to evaluate whether or not you should take a break or kind of fully log off social media, one thing that's very important to consider is the way that that act is going to impact your social life. And whether or not you're going to be able to, have the same kind of social exposure and social connection in real life. And that might sound like quite a strange thing because, I imagine the preference is for many people to kind of socialize in real life. But it seems like there's been a huge cultural shift. And the shift has been so powerful that it feels as though there is and especially after having been kind of, in lockdown for such a long time, it feels like there is a higher, at least for me, it feels like there is a higher threshold for kind of socializing in the real world versus socializing online on social media. I guess, I probably need to define what I mean by socializing, but I guess, I don't really spend a whole heap of time messaging people on my phone or on Instagram or whatever. But I think I scroll through my feed often and, there are lots of things I don't like about scrolling through my feed, but there are parts of it that I do like. And I guess that's the kind of the exposure to where people I care about the exposure, I get some kind of insight into their lives. But, I think my preference ultimately is to hang out with them in real life. So logging off, I guess, comes with pros and cons. If you're going to, kind of be seeing people in real life, log off. Great. I've done it before, but I don't think I actually filled my time while I was offline with socializing particularly actively. And I think that if I was to go offline again, I would want to kind of reconsider, how I was spending my time. And then I guess, there's a deeper element to the second question. So if we can't have meaningful change on social media, should we log off? I guess one kind of implicit part of that question is, will meaningful change come from platforms or mediums or modes of existing that aren't social media? Kind of non-online forms of change. And I think that it would be difficult to kind of participate in the world and to mobilize groups of people and to kind of spread one's message without social media today. And I guess being someone born, in the very late 20th century, and kind of being raised with technology, I don't have a very good insight into how things were beforehand. I don't really know how big groups of people were mobilized. I imagine it was, kind of, there was a much greater culture of physical togetherness and kind of word of mouth communication and gatherings. And I guess unless that's happening, unless that's one of the ways that you're pursuing meaningful change offline, then I think that, you'd be undermining one of the most important parts of social media, which is the kind of community that you can foster. I think that's all I'll say about the first question. And the second question is, this is a classic philosophy question. What is the purpose of our life? So I'm pausing because there's a way that this question that can be answered that is really kind of deflating and kind of boring. And that's by saying it's subjective, it's up to you. And there's part of me that kind of wants to say it and to leave it there, but I guess I've spent a lot of time studying the views of existential philosophers, and they have various views about what constitutes purpose and meaning and this kind of thing. And without kind of boring you with the details of their views, it seems like one thing that's very important for existential philosophy, for existentialists, is this idea of being free and kind of having a firm awareness of the fact that we can be free, whatever that means. And so I guess it's probably worth spending some time on the question of what it means to be free, because I think this is going to tie in with the question of what our purpose is in life. So I think if, let's say, someone asks me, as you have, what is the purpose of my life? I'll probably say the purpose of your life is to pay pretty close attention to many of the experiences you have, or at least to reflect on things that you've done in the past, and try and put together pieces of your experience to figure out what you care about. And obviously I'm not saying anything new here, but I think that this is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I think that's why even me, someone who's spent so much time thinking about, what is an existential crisis? What is our purpose? What is our duty? This kind of thing. I keep returning to this question. And I think it's because it isn't a question that has a static answer. It's not as if you can just say, there is one purpose in my life, and that is to be free. I think that in answering the question of what our purpose is, it requires a kind of constant or semi-constant checking in with, am I doing stuff that I actually want to be doing? Is there any way, if I'm not doing stuff that I want to be doing, is there any way that I can change my circumstances? What do I draw meaning from? Let's say I like playing guitar. Why don't I play more guitar? If I like to draw, why don't I draw? And what's puzzling about the kind of question of purpose and what constitutes purpose is that I don't know if this is a kind of universal phenomenon, but I often feel like I have a very good awareness of what is good for me and what kind of makes me feel like my life is going well, and what makes me feel like my life is purposeful. And what's really curious is that I often don't do the things that I suspect are contributing to my life feeling purposeful. So let me give you an example. This video is an example. I think that kind of, making a podcast, working on videos, thinking about philosophy, writing about philosophy, reading philosophy, these are all things that give me great kind of feelings of being connected and feeling like my life has meaning and purpose. But for some reason, they're not a priority. Or they are a priority, but they don't I don't make time for them every day. But I want to. I always want to. But for some reason, this probably just comes down to time management. But I wonder whether this is a shared feeling that people have. They have an awareness of what their passions are and what they care about. But it's very difficult to actually do that stuff. It's not as if kind of identifying what you care about or identifying what makes you feel like you have purpose. It's not as if those things actually have a very strong impact on how you spend your time. And this is a big problem for me personally. Not being able to kind of reconcile those two forces. The force that says, this is what's important. And then the force that says, this is how I should spend my time. Or this is how I am spending my time. I don't feel like there's enough of an overlap between them. And so I think, thanks for asking this question, because I think it's, again reminded me that I want to pay more close attention to what I'm doing with my time, because, one thing that I'm very glad is spoken about more today in 2021 is mental health. And one of the main contributors to the kind of my experiences of well-being is actually doing things that I care about. And so my answer for you, when you say, what is the purpose of my life? At least one component of answering that question is evaluating what you care about and making time to do those things. Because I guess it's one thing to know what you care about, but it's another thing to kind of pursue it. I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. If you have any more questions, leave a comment below. Or you can send me a message on Instagram. I wanted to say that if you've enjoyed this video or any of the other content that I make. For example, I have a podcast called Aleks Listens, where I interview philosophers and talk about a bunch of stuff. If you enjoy any of this, please consider supporting my project on Patreon or PayPal, and there'll be links in the bio below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.